This is the IOA Podcast, a space for truth, tenderness, and becoming whole, one breath at a time. Welcome back, everyone, to the IOA Podcast. I am Dr. Malaika, and remember, this is a space where we heal loudly and we live softly. If you're brand new to this space, I want you to pull up a chair and get comfortable. And if you've been with me since season 1, you already know how this goes. Thank you very much for keeping me company. I do not take it lightly that you keep coming back. So before we get into today's episode, I want to do a little housekeeping because this community is growing and I want to keep building it with intention. So if this show has meant anything to you in a moment when you truly needed it, here are some 3 quick asks that I have. First, I want you to hit the like or subscribe or follow, depending on where you are listening. If you're on Apple Podcast, if you're listening on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or watching on YouTube or anywhere else where podcasts live, I want you to follow this because it's the single most powerful thing that you can do to help this work reach the people who need it. Second, if you are watching this or listening to this on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review with one honest sentence about the show, and the reviews will help new listeners decide to trust us with their time. Third, share an episode this week, any episode. It does not have to be current. Share whatever episode you feel like it met you where you were at that moment with someone who has been carrying something quietly. This is community care in action. All of our platforms will be linked in the show notes. And so the Substack companion to this episode will also be live a little bit before the episode is live when you listen to it. So we go live every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And typically you get the live show notes right before the show goes live so that you can be prepared for what we are going to talk about for the day. And with those extended show notes and Substack companions, you will get extended practices. You get reflection prompts if you're a paid subscriber. So there's benefits to being a paid subscriber. So let's make sure that you are getting the benefits. All right. And then also, as always, I would love to shout out my WDJY listeners in the great city of Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm really excited to continue to do this work with you. And hopefully you will continue to listen and continue to share the episodes with those you feel can benefit from them as well. So I really want to kind of get into what this episode is going to be about, because this one I feel like has been a long one forming in me over time. And I think it's going to meet some of you exactly where you are currently. And so we're going to take a quick break and we'll come back and we'll get into talking about concepts of chosen family, safe circles, and the people that basically help us heal and are there to support our healing. So we will be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone, to the episode. And we are going to get into this first segment. And we're going to talk about moving from survival to wholeness. And this is basically the threshold that most of us are standing on. I want to start by naming something out loud because, as you know, I believe that you have to name things in order to begin the healing process. And I think a lot of us are walking around with this feeling and just haven't really had the words for it. There is a moment that happens in our healing journey, and most of us do not get warned about it. It just kind of happens after the hardest part of it is over. So like after the crisis has passed, after the bills got paid, no matter how much you had to go through to get it done, after your kid has stabilized in whatever way it was in their life, after the diagnosis that you got has been managed, the breakup is no longer the most recent thing. after the grief stopped knocking the wind out of you every morning. It happens after that. It happens after you survived and gone through the experience. You make it to the other side of whatever it was, and then it seems like this strange quiet kind of settles in. The adrenaline is no longer there, it drains. The fight in you is over. Instead of you feeling relief, though, you sometimes feel almost like loss, right? Who am I now if I'm not the one putting out the fire? Who am I if I'm not the strong one fighting against something? Who am I if I'm not the one holding it all together? These are the things and the feelings that you have in that moment after you have pushed through things. That feeling is not a failure of healing. That feeling is actually establishing the threshold. The threshold is basically, the way I would put it, is the doorway between survival and wholeness. It's one of the most disorienting places in our healing journey, because survival is a posture that we have practiced for so long that I think it stopped feeling like a posture and it really started to feel like who we were as a person. It's almost as if survival became our identity or our personality, or became the thing that was, we were praised for that. We were known for that. And that's what we're now proud of. And when the condition that required survival to start in the beginning now softens, we don't always know how to go back to being soft. So this particular episode is for anyone who is standing at that threshold. Anyone who looks at their life right now and notices that the storm has quieted, but they have not internally. Anyone whose body is still bracing for impact, they're being hypervigilant, and they're bracing for something that is no longer coming. This is for the one who has done so much work to survive that they forgot that survival was supposed to be the floor and not the ceiling. This is for you who got everything that you prayed for and then didn't know how to receive it. Today, we're going to talk about three things. One, we're going to talk about the actual difference between surviving and wholeness, because if we don't name it clearly and we don't identify what it is, we cannot move toward it. Two, we're going to talk about why survival becomes an identity for so many of us, especially for those of us shaped by community trauma, generational scarcity, and the demand to perform as if you are okay. And then three, we're going to talk about what it looks like in practical terms to step across that threshold and start the slow, unspectacular, boring practice of being whole. This, for me, is what I would call a bridge episode. The one that I feel I have been building in this season so far for a while, but didn't realize that we had come here so quickly, because as I was going through season 2 and as we got into this journey, I'm watching too many of us arrive at the other side of something hard and not knowing how to put down the weapons that you had to carry to get there. And so when I was planning out the season and deciding to come into this season with R.E.S.T to talk about, I realized that a lot of the feedback that I was getting was from people that still had their weapons out. But they had their weapons out and they had nothing to use the weapons against. And what they're not realizing is that the weapons are heavy. You are carrying something that weighs you down, that you don't need, and don't understand that they were never meant to be permanent attachments to your body. Weapons are meant to be tools. You pick them up when you need them and you put them down when the work is done. We're not meant to drag them out. So we are going to dig a little bit deeper into this understanding, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the difference between surviving and wholeness. So let's take a break and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Let's talk about the difference between surviving and wholeness. I want to define both because I think that we often use these words loosely and we're not actually understanding what they mean because they're very different things. Surviving is the body's brilliant, amazing, ancient, and sacred way that it responds to threat. It is the system narrowing itself specifically to do one job, which is to keep you alive. Surviving narrows your focus. It's going to sharpen your attention. It mutes the part of you that are not immediately useful for getting through what you're going through. When I teach my students about the nervous system and we get into talking about the autonomic nervous system, one of the things that they learn is that there's certain things that are heightened in the moment when we're activated to fight against a threat. And then once those things are activated, certain things are particularly taken down because they're not necessary for that moment. This is what's happening to you when you're going through survival. When you are in survival mode, your nervous system is doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's allocating the resources to the present danger and quieting everything else. But with the quieting, things like joy, they get quiet. Your imaginations get quiet. Long-term planning, the curiosity, that inner softness that's in you goes underground because softness is not what survival needs from you in that moment. Survival is not a flaw. I feel like it's actually genius. It's how your ancestors made it through the things that should have ended their line and their lineage, but it didn't. It's the thing that should have made them quit, but it didn't. We are literally alive because the people who came before us, the people we come from, knew how to survive. So I don't want you to take this as me attacking survival or attacking you if you're in survival mode. But what we have to understand is that survival was never supposed to be the destination. Survival's a bridge. It's a season. It's momentary. It's a chapter. It was never supposed to be your whole book. Now let's look at wholeness. Wholeness is not the absence of struggle. So we have to get over this concept and belief that when you're whole, nothing bad happens. Wholeness is the presence of all of you. It's the integrated parts of you working together, allowed to come into the room, even when the days are hard. Wholeness is basically your nervous system widening back out. So, again, with that autonomic nervous system, after the fight or flight response happens, the body levels back out and everything goes back to functioning in the way it is supposed to. It is the returning of joy, imagination, curiosity, that softness, the longing, the desire, the rest, all the things that had to be set to the side. Those things are now the things that are coming back into the room. The parts of you that went underground during the storm are now being allowed to surface again. Wholeness is the breath that goes all the way down to the bottom of your lungs because your body finally trusts the air. Wholeness is also not the finish line. It's not a state that you arrive at and stay in forever. It is a way of beginning and being in relationship with yourself where every part of you is welcome at the table, not just the parts that you feel earn their keep by being productive or the parts that are palatable or the parts that are strong. Here's the thing that I feel no one is willing to speak out loud. The skills you develop to survive are not always the skills you need to be whole. This is like using the wrong tools for the wrong job. Yes, a screwdriver is effective, but if you're dealing with a nail that needs to be hammered, that is not the tool you need for that job. In fact, sometimes being in this mode is actually what I would say is the opposite of what you need sometimes. So hypervigilance on its own is not a bad thing, but the hypervigilance that kept you safe in a hostile environment becomes the hypervigilance that keeps you from resting in a safe one. That's the opposite of what you need. That self-reliance that you had that protected you when no one was coming becomes a self-reliance that makes it impossible for you to let love in when it finally arrives. The performance of being okay that got you through those moments that were tough, that work day that was crazy, now becomes the performance of being okay that keeps your closest people from knowing how to hold you. Survival skills do not just disappear because the threat is gone. They have to be retired intentionally and done with care. And you're going to need to replace them with something that fits the life you are actually living now. This is the work of wholeness. It is so much harder than just survival because survival had clear goals, stakes that you could see. Wholeness is basically asking you to soften when softening still feels dangerous for you. It doesn't feel like you should be able to do that. Wholeness asks you to receive when you have only ever known how to give. Wholeness is going to ask you to trust being in a calm situation and trust calm in your life. And calm is sometimes a stranger to a lot of us. I've had clients where they come in after they have left a long, difficult marriage. And if we're looking at it, they're now free. They're now living on their own after decades of being in this relationship. Their children are stable. They're living on their own, doing their own things. Everything's been paid. The worst part is over. But still, they'll sit across from me and say that they don't recognize their own life because they keep waiting for the next disaster to happen. They can't enjoy any of the things that they have pushed through to get to the other side of. And they think that something is wrong with them. My advice always is not that something's wrong with them. It's that their nervous system has simply just been calibrated to disaster for all the years that they were in that relationship, the dynamic of that relationship. And because of that, calm felt like a vacuum. Peace felt like the floor was about to drop out for them. This was not an issue of pathology. This was the body in transition. This was the threshold. This was conditioning that was necessary for what they were living through. So, in the language of Aya, we know that the fern, it's so amazing to me that the more I dig into it, the more it still unfolds itself to me. But the fern survives in moments where it needs to fight by curling itself up. One of the things we know about ferns is they have the ability to figure out a way to thrive in all conditions. So the fronds, which are like the leaves, they fold onto themselves. And the reason why they're doing that is they're protecting the most tender parts of its body. And they're trying to wait their way out, whatever storm or adversity they're going through. That's sacred. And that's also a metaphor for how we live. It's a metaphor for how we were created. That is how the fern lives long enough to grow. But the part that we often miss is that the fern doesn't stay curled. When the conditions soften, the fronds, they unfurl. It's now opening. It's opening. It might do it slowly, but it's opening. And it opens itself into the light that it was always meant for. The unfurling is its own kind of work. It's not passive. It's very deliberate, but it's also vulnerable. But I still feel like it's a beautiful act of trust. It's trusting that I can be able to let my guards down. Wholeness is that unfurling. You spent so long being curled, protecting the tender center of you, that you forgot the tender center was the whole point. You were protecting it for a reason. You're not put here to be a closed fist for the rest of your life. You were put here to open. And I need you to remember that and let this be your guide as you continue to move forward. We are going to take another break. And when we come back, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the episode. Be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone. Let's talk about survival, becoming our identity. We talked about the fact that for some of us, we don't know how to put the weapons down. I want us to understand why survival gets so sticky for many of us. It's not as simple as just deciding to stop, because if it really were that simple, we would have already probably done that. Survival becomes identity when the conditions that required it lasted long enough to shape and condition who we are. And for a lot of us, those conditions did not just last for a season. They could have lasted for years. They could have lasted for decades. It could have been our entire childhood. It could literally be our entire family line. If you grew up in a household where money was always tight, your body learned to scan for scarcity. You learned to anticipate what was missing before anyone said it out loud. You learned to want less so that you would not be disappointed. You learned to make yourself easy because you didn't want to add to anyone's load. That's survival. And now it's become your personality. People praised you for being low maintenance. People praised you for being independent. People praised you for being the strong one. And that praise reinforced the posture in you until the posture became you. If you grew up as the child of a parent who was overwhelmed or absent or unwell, your body learned to read the room quickly. You learned what mood your caregiver was in before you walked through the door. You learned how to be the calm one, the easy one, the one that didn't ruffle feathers, who didn't need anything. And now your nervous system has organized itself around managing other people's emotional states. And that skill, yes, it's extraordinary. But the problem is you became the person everyone calls in a crisis, and you're now the one who feels the responsibility to de-escalate a room. You're the one who knows how to make people feel better, even strangers, but you're doing it at your own expense. And nobody told you that this skill was a survival skill. Everybody told you, oh, you're so gifted. This is great. You're amazing. And while that sounds great, it's not meant to be long-term. It's meant to be based on the situations and the circumstances. If you're a Black woman or a woman of African descent, you're also navigating an inheritance that I feel like is bigger than just your individual family. You are navigating centuries of survival being demanded of you. A strong Black woman is not just a stereotype. She is actually a strategy that our foremothers used to stay alive in a country that did not consider her tenderness to be something sacred, to be valued and protected. The strong Black woman is what got built when softness was not safe. And while we honor that legacy and we honor the woman who had to armor herself so that their daughter would have a path, we're honoring the legacy, but not putting ourselves in the position that requires us to live inside that armor forever. Our foremothers built the armor so that one day we could put it down. And you're probably like, Dr. Malaika, what does putting it down mean? You know, I look at it like this. Putting it down is actually the inheritance that they left for us. The unfurling is part of the inheritance. That's what it means. It means allowing yourself to not be on guard, allowing yourself to soften, allowing yourself to rest because it is necessary. Survival also becomes identity because it's the thing that the world rewards. The world doesn't reward you being soft. How often do we see stories on the news or things on social media that talks about, oh, she was such a soft, kind-hearted person. She was just a gentle, calm spirit. Oftentimes we see those hero stories of she had a fight and a resilience in her that was admirable because the world is rewarding your output. The world doesn't ask if you're well. They don't ask if you're okay. They just ask, what are you delivering? Now, because of this, we're learning early on that the version of us that survives, performs, produces, pushes through is the version that often gets paid, gets promoted, gets praised, and gets seen. And it's the version of us that is tired. It's also tender, slow, and uncertain in the process because we're quietly told that we don't have the ability to come back to ourselves after we've gone through these things and gotten ourselves together. We're never getting that messaging. And because of it, we're hiding. We're hiding the in-process part of us. We're dressing up survival in professional clothes and we're calling it being ambitious. We're dressing up our hypervigilance in spiritual clothes and we're calling it discernment. We dress up abandoning ourself in mothering clothes and call it sacrifice. We dress up the burnout in hustle clothes and we call it a grind. We just keep going because going is the only thing we know how to do. And then a different kind of grief will eventually set in. The grief of realizing that the life you built was a life built on the back of a version of you that was just trying to survive. Now you're looking around at a career, a marriage, a home, a body, and recognizing that the survival self picked all of this that's around you. And the whole self might actually crave something different. And that's a hard recognition to sit with. And because you have to sit with it, you're actually going through a real grief. It's paradoxically one of those ways that the doorway now opens up to the threshold that I think leads us to the place that we actually need to be. Here's what I want you to hear me say. I've said it multiple times already this episode that there's no shame in the fact that survival became your identity because it was necessary. You did what you needed to do to be alive in a room that you were born into. Your survival is not a character flaw. It's just an evidence of your intelligence and your resourcefulness and your ability to do what you needed to do to keep yourself above water. The fact that you're still standing means the conditions have shifted enough that now you have the ability to begin to ask a new question. Not how do I survive this, but who am I when I'm not surviving? Who am I underneath the strategy? Who is the self that has been waiting, patient, quiet for the storm to pass so that she can finally come out and rest in her own life? That's the threshold. And we're going to step toward it now. So we're going to take a break and we're going to come back and we're going to have what I would like to call that threshold moment and identifying what it is so that you know when you get there. We will be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone. And we are going to talk about identifying the threshold moment. So how do you know when you're at the threshold? I want to describe it because sometimes the threshold is hard to identify. It's not obvious. It doesn't come with loud fireworks like a lot of the crises that we survive do, but it's this slow, kind of strange disorientation that happens. You might notice that the thing that used to motivate you, fear, urgency, the next emergency, that motivation has gone quiet. And now you don't know what to do or put in its place. You might find yourself with a free Saturday and not know what to do with it. And I am speaking for myself. I had to learn how to rest because rest felt foreign to me. Stillness felt unsafe. You might notice in those moments, like I noticed, that my body was tight, even though my circumstances were okay and things had softened. You might feel yourself picking fights, creating drama, saying yes to things that you don't need to say yes to, just to feel that familiar hum of crisis again. Because crisis was where you knew yourself clearly and definitively. You might also notice that the relationships you built in survival mode do not quite fit you anymore. The friend who only knows how to commiserate in your crises or misery. That family member who only calls you when something is wrong. The community that bonded over what you all were enduring, but does not know how to bond over what you all are becoming. The threshold is going to be uncomfortable for your relationships. Sometimes growing past survival means you're going to grieve the bonds that were forged inside of it. We often overuse the concept or misuse the concept of trauma bonds. And I don't want to put that here, but I want you to get a picture. A lot of you can understand what is conceptually being said with that. And what is happening is that relationships are developed when you're in that survival mode, and now those bonds that were forged inside of that moment are no longer healthy for where you are currently. You may notice that softness, when you let it in, can sometimes feel almost like grief, because softness is giving your body permission to feel everything that it has postponed because it was activated for the emergency. That first cry that you have after that long survival season is not always about you being sad. Sometimes it's just your body and your spirit and your psyche and emotions just exhaling. You're finally letting go of what you've been holding on to. And that cry deserves to be honored, not pathologized, not made to feel like something's wrong. Your cry is a return. The threshold is also where a lot of us self-sabotage. And so I want to name this directly because I see it all the time in practice. People do extraordinary work to survive this hard season. And then right as the door to their wholeness opens up for them, they walk back into the storm. They take the job that recreates the chaos. They go back to that partner. They pick up a habit. They book the calendar up so full that they don't have any quiet time to land in. They do this because survival, even though it was painful, is familiar. Wholeness, even desirable wholeness, is a stranger. This is your nervous system gravitating towards what it knows. The job of your nervous system is not to keep you happy. The job of your nervous system is to keep you in the conditions it knows how to manage. And if that has only ever been managing survival, calm is going to feel like a malfunction in the programming. When you're feeling peace, that feels like the floor is about to fall out underneath you. Or if you feel joy in a moment, it feels like you're setting yourself up to be disappointed. Let's name some of the specific ways that you can see this, because I want you to be able to catch yourself if you feel like you're going into it. You finally get a rest day and you fill it with nothing but errands and busy work that you didn't actually need to do that day because stillness for you is too loud. Or you finally get in a steady relationship and you start a fight about the smallest thing because intimacy without crisis feels foreign to you. You finally save that money and then you go and you spend it impulsively because abundance pressing up against you when you were built for scarcity feels like some kind of threat. You finally get that quiet weekend and you book the calendar full for the next one because empty time feels like there's some problem that needs to be solved. None of these are moral failures, but all of them are examples of your nervous system trying to return to a temperature that it better understands. The work that you need to do at the threshold is to start catching these moments in real time. You need to pause when you feel the pull towards a familiar chaos. You need to ask yourself quietly, what would it take to let this calm be okay for another minute? Then you progress to another hour. Then you can progress to another day. The body learns by repetition. That repetition is continuing to condition yourself by starting with one moment of staying, and then you fight the urge to flee, and you keep piling these moments on top of each other. So if you're at the threshold and you feel like you're about to wreck a good thing, I want you to hear me. You are not crazy. You are not broken, and you're not ungrateful. You are a nervous system encountering a temperature that it has not been calibrated to yet. The body needs time to learn that calm is not the prelude to catastrophe. It requires repeated, gentle exposure to being safe. It requires a practice. It requires a kind of slow daily work that's not often glamorous and does not photograph well, doesn't come across well on social media, but is the actual substance of healing. Which brings me to the practice. I want us to take a break, and then I want to bring in the R.E.S.T framework for us to talk about the practice that we need to feel at the threshold. We'll take a quick break and we will be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone. And we are going to go into a different way of putting into action the concepts that we are talking about in this particular episode. I know that we often do an I pause for our episodes, but I wanted to look at this a little bit differently for this week because I feel like giving you this practice would be something that is going to be beneficial to you. Um, if you've been with me for a while, then you understand the R.E.S.T framework. It's reconnecting or reconnect, embody, speak, and tend. This is the framework that holds the work of moving from survival to wholeness. And so what I want to do is I want to walk you through this so that you feel like you are competent enough to do this away from me, because I feel like that's the most important part. Can you do this when you are away from me? So let's go into it. It is when you find yourself buying yourself fruit at the grocery store, and instead of selecting the one that's on sale, you actually take the time to pick the one that you actually want, realizing that you no longer have to be forced into that scarcity mindset because you're no longer in that mode in life. Reconnection in this moment is the practice of you meeting yourself where you are in the moment, right? It's saying to yourself, yes, in times past, because I did live in scarcity, I often had to go with the things that were the easiest to buy. I'm no longer there. I have better practices that allows me to be able to enjoy in the moment, but know that my future is being planned for as well. So I have savings, things are put to the side. These are the things that you are able to do by reconnecting to where you are in that moment. Reconnection is an important part of this R.E.S.T format. Next, we're looking at the E for embody. Survival lives in our head a lot of times because we're strategizing, we're calculating, planning, scanning, and wholeness is the opposite. It lives in our body. It's our breath, the weight, the ground, the sensations. At the threshold, you have to come back to your body, and you're going to have to do it slowly because the body has been holding the receipts for everything that you did not let yourself feel while you were in that storm. Embodiment at that threshold moment can look like a long shower where you actually let the water touch you, and you walk where you notice the trees instead of it being a to-do list. You eat a meal without looking at a screen. You take a breath that goes all the way down and you feel it throughout your body. Embodiment is the slow return of attention from the mind of the body until the body remembers that it's at home. The S is for speak. When you're at the threshold, what we say to ourselves now has to change. The survival self talks in commands. Get up, push through, don't let them see you cry, don't slow down. But when you're in your whole self, the whole self talks in something closer to a lullaby. It's quiet, it's soothing. It says, here you are. I see you. You can rest. I'm not going anywhere. The practice of speaking is the practice of changing the voice that lives inside of you. We have to change our self-talk. This is not affirmation theater, so that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you just pin affirmations up around you, which I believe affirmations are necessary. This is the slow daily decision to interrupt that survival voice when it shows up and offer yourself the language that you would offer to a beloved child or a very close loved one or someone you really care about. Speak to yourself the way you wish someone had spoken to you when you were younger and you needed it the most. That's the voice that your voice is now becoming, and that's the voice that's important. T is for tend. Tending is the unsexy daily labor of wholeness. It is not glamorous at all. It is the part that nobody romanticizes because tending does not look like a transformation moment. It looks like making the doctor's appointment like you're supposed to, refilling the prescription, going to bed at a reasonable hour, even when there was a lot to do, just drinking water, calling that friend back, putting your phone down when you said you would. Tending is the practice of being a consistent caregiver to your own life. It's not perfect, but it's consistent. And there is a difference. And inside the R.E.S.T framework, the practice I want to give you for this threshold season is revisiting the I of pause. That concept, that tool is not something that I just put together just because it sounded great. The I of pause is not a break that you earn. It's not a reward for finishing your to-do list. It's a break that you take on purpose in the middle of your life, even when it's not perfect circumstances. You're trying to take back the parts of you that were removed when or suppressed when you had to survive. It's the small intentional return to yourself that you do not need to permission to ask for. At the threshold, the I of pause will be a tool that will be very effective on how you remind your nervous system all day, every day, that you are safe enough to be here. You don't have to brace. This moment is allowed to just be a moment. It's not a crisis disguised as a moment. It really is the moment. And here's how I want you to apply it without us doing one together for this episode. Here's how I want you to practice it this week. 3 times a day, set a quiet signal, right? We talked about this in the last episode. Whatever you are using as your signal, when that signal comes out, you're going to do what I told you to do in the last episode for 30 seconds. You're going to take those 3 deep breaths. The first breath, you'll notice where you are. The second breath, you'll notice what your body is doing. And then on that third breath, you'll tell your body in your own words that the moment is okay. You're not in your storm right now and that you're allowed to be here. Those 30 seconds, 3 times a day across 1 week, like I said last week, is just 10.5 minutes of practice. That's all. I'm not asking you to drastically change your life. I'm telling you that your nervous system will track those 10.5 minutes in a way that will be powerful and you'll start to see a difference. It will start to learn that calm is not a setup. Stillness is not dangerous for you. You'll be home more so. You'll feel home in your body and you'll realize that the storm has actually passed. That is how your wholeness gets built. You may not have a brilliant epiphany. You may not go off to a retreat, but in 30 seconds of returning back to yourself repeatedly, you are now training your body to believe it's okay until it really starts to embody that it is whole and okay. Let's take another break for the last time in this episode. And when we come back, we are going to close out the show. Be back in just a second. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with me again for another episode. And before we get out of here, I want to say one more thing to whoever needs to hear this. If you're at the threshold right now and you're scared, that is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. That's actually a sign that you're doing something right. Wholeness can be scary for all the reasons we talked about in this episode, right? It requires you to put down the weapons that have become your identity that has been keeping you alive and allow your body to go into that calm. The body doesn't want to let go of that survival strategy without a fight. So you're going to feel that resistance. But when you feel the urge to go back, I'm asking you, do not interpret that as evidence that the wholeness is not for you. Interpret it as evidence that you are right on the edge of becoming. You don't have to leap into it. It could be a step. It could just be one breath at a time. And eventually you put these small things together, but the inside of you is noticing the change. And that's the part that matters the most. Just like the fern, keep coming back, keep unfurling yourself when it's not necessary. And sometimes it unfurls very slowly and it might be deliberate. For you, it might be the same thing. So I want you to let that be your model. Let the fern guide you. This is what wholeness actually looks like. It doesn't look like arrival. It's not often flashy. It just looks like opening. And you're allowed to open at your own pace, and you're allowed to do it with whatever amount of time that you have to take. Rest of this year, rest of the decade, the rest of your life. Keep opening. There's no deadline, there's no clock, there's no amount of time that you can put on wholeness. There's only the practice, and that practice is yours. So we're going to get out of here. I know I've left you all with a lot to sit with, but I think that it's really important. And I want you to take this into your week, remembering that while survival is sacred, it got you here, you honor it, and it's something that was necessary. You're ready to retire it. It's okay. And I want you to do that one moment at a time. Don't forget the practices that we talked about for this episode. Remember, if this episode met you somewhere, right, do me a favor, send it to one person that's within your network, a person that you connect to let them know, hey, you're standing at the threshold. I see it, and you might not have language for it, but here's something that might be a tool and a resource that can help you. Remember, subscribe, review, share. That's how we keep the work reaching the people who need it. And next week, when we get into episode 30, I'm going to take us a little bit deeper on talking about the body, because we did threshold work this week. And I think it holds if the body actually learns how to do that. So we're going to talk about the somatic anchors and what it actually means to make your body a place that you can come home to regularly. So until then, I want you to breathe slow, take your iPause, let yourself open at the pace of the fern. And again, I'm Dr. Malaika. This is the IOA, and I will see you again on Tuesday of next week. Have a great one. This is the IOA podcast, a space for truth, tenderness, and becoming whole, one breath at a time. Make sure to like and subscribe.